Alright, AP Human Geography classes, on to our second video in agriculture, and we're going to focus on where are agricultural regions in LDCs, and what we're going to specifically focus on is what type of farming methods they use. Well, there are 4 types of farming methods used in LDCs. 1 is shifting cultivation, 2 is pastoral nomadism, 3 is intensive subsistence farming, and 4 is plantation farming. Let's get to it. Alright, number 1, shifting cultivation. Well, this is practiced in humid, low-level altitude regions because it requires high temperatures and abundant rainfall for the crops that are grown. It's usually most popular in rainforests. There are 2 distinct shifting cultivation features. 1 is slash and burn agriculture, and this is when they literally slash the vegetation or reap the vegetation and then burn the remaining debris to enrich the soil. 2nd is the fallow method, and this is what other farmers use even in MDCs, except a little bit different in LDCs. Farmers cultivate a piece of land and then leave it unplanted for many years and cycle back to it. Let's talk about it further. Alright, here's the process of shifting cultivation. As you can see to the picture on the right, farmers first clear the land of trees by hand, usually with a machete. Farmers then create furrows or rows to plant seeds in, similar to what we do in MDCs. Now, the land cleared is called a swidden, alright, and it's usually cleared by animals such as an oxen and plow. Now, after the crops are harvested, the land is burned, and there's 2 reasons why. A, it's the quickest way to clear the debris, and number 2, it enriches the soil with the debris left over. Now, the land is used for roughly 3 years before farmers do indeed burn the vegetation. Now, farmers will not return to the swidden between 6 to even 20 years later for reuse, and then you literally repeat the process again. Now, what are some types of crops grown and the popularity of shifting cultivation? Well, the types of crops grown depends on the custom and dietary taste. So it ranges anywhere from papayas to bananas to pineapples to mangoes to even cotton. Now, most farmers grow only enough for their families, right? There is little surplus to give. Now, the popularity with shifting cultivation, it uses 1/4 of the world's land area, and there's a reason why, right? Just because the land isn't being used currently doesn't mean it's not going to later be used for shifting cultivation. It uses a lot of land, but it only accounts for 5% of the world's farmers that use this method. So it's henceforth unpopular. All right, what is going to happen to shifting cultivation? Well, right now it's currently declining, and for a number of reasons. It promotes deforestation, right, hacking down trees, and the World Bank will no longer make loans to farmers and LDCs that practice this method. So yes, they did indeed at one time loan out money for this method. Now it is slowly being replaced by cattle ranching and the cultivation of cash crops. Here's the reason why. MDCs love their beef and love certain types of crops, such as sugarcane, perhaps tobacco. This is big money for LDCs and farmers in them. Therefore, they will reap these instead of other crops. Now, another drawback is that shifting cultivation can only support a small population. And like I said before, it has huge environmental drawbacks such as deforestation and pollution. Let's move on to pastoral nomadism. It is a form of subsistence farming, but it uses domestication of animals instead. So these people live directly off the animals that they travel with. Now, these animals provide milk, they use skin and hair for clothing, and yes, indeed, when they die, they use them for meat. But most farmers eat grains instead of meat. Obviously, you need the animals to survive. So these are used by farmers in dry climates, specifically in Southwest Asia and North Africa. 2 groups that are popular are the Bedouins of Saudi Arabia and the Messiah of East Africa that you might be familiar with. What's interesting in pastoral nomadism is the size of the herd is a measure of power and prestige. Now, typically a family, again, depending on their size, would have animals ranging from 10 to even 60. It just depends. All right, here are some of the choices of animals they have. First, it's based on the local culture and physical characteristics of the area, depending on the animal, what they can live off of in the climate. Now, in North Africa and Southwest Asia, the preferred animal is a camel. It is most resistant to weather and can last longest without water and food. And sheep and goats are also popular as well. In Central Asia, the preferred animal is the horse. Now, these patterns of migration in these areas are actually based on intimate knowledge of the landscape, usually passed down from generation to generation to know exactly where to go when, for water, so on and so forth. Now, the popularity and future of pastoral nomadism. Now, only 15 people practice this, right? This is more or less of a in between a hunter-gatherer society and a sedentary farming or settled farming. It only encompasses 20% of the Earth's land area. Now, shouldn't be a shock. Pastoral nomadism is declining rapidly due to technology, specifically transportation. Pastoral nomads used to be messengers that would travel with their herd across these inhospitable regions such as deserts. Even government is now settling or resettling these nomads in China, Kazakhstan, Israel, and Saudi Arabia. All right, let's move on to the most popular farming method, intensive subsistence agriculture, which many of you are probably familiar with. This encompasses 75% of the world's farmers that use this method. Now, again, the farmers only produce enough for their families with little surplus. The work is mostly done by hand, and animals are used over machinery, primarily due to a lack of funds. Now, the most populous crop grown under this method, indeed, yes, is wet rice. You can see a wet rice farm to the right there. Now, here are two methods of subsistence farming. One is called double cropping. Now, this is when farmers plan to reap 2 harvests per year. The only problem, it greatly exhausts the soil, and it can only be used in warmer climates such as South China. Another method is crop rotation, which actually is used in MDCs as well. This is when you rotate planting and using different fields. So you plant one half of your field and leave the other half unplanted in order for the soil to heal. Now, it's really only used in colder climates, all right, and soil lasts much longer than double cropping. All right, moving on to our last one, plantation farming. This is a form of commercial agriculture found in tropical and subtropical regions such as Latin America, Africa, and Asia. And some popular plantation crops that are grown, and this is why it links to those areas because they can be grown there, is cotton, sugarcane, coffee, rubber, and tobacco. Now, shouldn't be a shock, these plantation farms are often owned by Europeans or North Americans, and these crops are primarily used and sold just in MDCs, with farmers who directly grow these crops only really benefiting from it. All right, guys, that was it. Quick little wrap up of farming and LDCs. We'll discuss this much more in class. See you then.